Before we get into that, lots of great stuff over at BangTheBook.com. Make sure you're checking out everything that gets posted on a daily basis over there. We've got so much stuff going on. Lots of great articles, daily betting trends, picks and previews, analysis articles, futures articles. Just so many things going on over there. Our matchup data section, sportsbook reviews, free contests where you win cash prizes. Check out what we have to offer at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. This and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends at DSI Sportsbook. If you sign up at DSI using that promo code BTB and the number 25, you get a $25 free bet just for signing up. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well. At BetDSI, it's only a game until you bet it. Two guests coming your way here on this Thursday edition of the show. The first, Mr. Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. Brad, how's it going today, brother?
It's going well. Good to hear your voice on this fine Thursday morning.
Good to chat with you as well, buddy. And you know what? Let's go ahead and start with something that you and I just have to talk college football. I think on pretty much every segment that you're on. I didn't mention it there in the intro, but our regular listeners of the show know that college football, your bread and butter, your true passion, something that you do year-round. And as you and I were kind of going over some stuff here for the segment this morning, made mention to me that you've already put out some futures and some week one plays for the 2018 college football season. It's I guess you're getting a head start on the market there.
Yeah, to say the least. But I know a lot of people probably roll their eyes and not thinking that there's value in tying your money up for almost an entire year. But there is some value to be had. And the two teams that I bet as far as future wise. Now, look, I think Alabama should be and deserves to be the overwhelming favorite. And I will shop around in different places in the state of Nevada and see if I can get a better ticket than 2-1, which is the current price of Alabama. If I can find a 3-1 or 4-1 at a shop in Mesquite, or if I go up to Reno sometime early spring or early summer and find some, absolutely I'm going to bet Alabama to win the title. But I thought a couple of future tickets that were a little bit off. Michigan State's 40-1. This is a team that's won at least 10 games in 6 of the last 8 seasons. They get both Ohio State and Michigan at home in conference play. If you're worried, they have beaten Michigan 8 of the last 10 times they played. They've beaten Ohio State 3 of the last 7, and 2 of their 4 losses the last 7 years were by a single point. So I don't think there's any intimidation factor there. Plus, they're probably going to be the most experienced Power 5 team in the country, 19 returning starters. So I'm looking to probably hedge that bet if they make at least the Big Ten championship game or the playoffs, which they have made the playoffs just a few years ago at 40-1. The other team I thought was relatively cheap. For a team that's probably going to be favored in all 12 of their games, for a team that's won 3 straight conference championship games, the Oklahoma Sooners at 25-1. Yes, they lose Baker Mayfield, but let's be honest. He was a walk-on coming out of high school, entering college. Kudos to him. He definitely was one of the biggest overachievers we've ever seen in college football history. But his replacement, Kyler Murray, was the number 1 prospect coming out of high school as far as the quarterback goes. Already has experience, a very talented player, and I think Oklahoma's very motivated for how that second half went in the Georgia game. So 25-1, a little cheap there. And then 5 Dimes has some week 1 lines up. Look, they're low limits. You got to lay -120. But it is the time of year where, there might be a few games that are probably off a touchdown. The one that I think is really off, Arizona against BYU. Arizona's laying about 7. Arizona will be just fine with Kevin Sumlin as the new head coach, especially with Khalil Tate coming back. I think BYU's head coach Sitake's on the hot seat. I think that's a very cheap number there. Arizona at home hosting BYU, lay the 7 if you can play it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, that's probably not a number that will be 7. And it's very interesting because one of the things I've been seeing on Twitter in the gambling community is that, with Arizona hiring Kevin Sumlin, he's bringing back Yates as the defensive coordinator as well. A lot of people may be looking to throw something on this team from a futures standpoint as well. I'm looking right now. I think it was 150-1 at 5 Dimes right now. They have up numbers for all of the contenders. BetOnline just has an Alabama versus the field prop. Not seeing any futures at DSI. But Arizona may be a team that people kind of throw a little bit of investment on just to see what they can do and, what may be a little bit weaker of a Pac-12 South this year. You figure it's going to take time at UCLA for Chip Kelly to put things together. USC, they have talent year in and year out. but how much do you want to trust Clay Helton? How much do you want to trust them with the guys that they're losing, because they are losing some high-caliber talent. So I think Arizona is a team that's going to have a lot of helium coming into the season, much like Washington did a couple of years ago, and we saw Washington make it into the college football playoff. Now, again, not the exact same situation. I think Chris Peterson, one of the best coaches in the country, but that Arizona number is probably only going to climb, and so is their perception.
Oh, no question about that. Another thing I like from just a pure value aspect, here's a team that failed to cover the spread in each of their 5 games. I mean, they got a little overpriced in the marketplace after Khalil Tate, jumped onto the scene. They won and covered like 3 or 4 games in a row, then got overpriced, and then, there's a lot of uncertainty there. But, look, I mean, Kevin Sumlin's not ideal, and Rich Rod, had his moments, obviously, at West Virginia, even had his moments at Arizona, but I think there's a slight upgrade there. The fact that they're getting some continuity at the staff, and keep in mind, a lot of those guys, believe it or not, actually have worked with Kevin Sumlin in the past, so I think it's an ideal situation. Another year, and I think you look at Khalil Tate be a decent fit in that new offense. I think that is a team, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The major thing is USC is going to be down with all the talent they lost, and UCLA is probably in a rebuild mode at least year one as they're totally changing schemes both sides of the ball. I think it's an opportunity. Would not be shocked. Arizona makes a Pac-12 title game, which they did just a few years ago. And keep in mind, if you got 100 to 1, 150 to 1 ticket, I mean, you could start hedging in that Pac-12 championship game and make some money on a $100 ticket.
No, absolutely. And again, that is the chief goal of every futures bet that you make, to find a way to guarantee some sort of profit if you get into a position to hedge. And it'd be great for Arizona to shock the entire world and win at 150 to 1. They're probably not going to, but if you get them in that Pac-12 title game, and if they're in that position, odds are it should be a pretty reasonable line, whether they play Stanford or Washington or maybe Oregon, puts it all together here this year. So it would be a reasonable line in that situation as well. So, again, things that you want to look at, forecast for the future. There is one game on the board for 5 dimes I want to ask you about from a college football standpoint. And maybe this is kind of a square opinion on my part, but when I look at let's try that again. When I look at what Jeff Brom did at Purdue, specifically what Nick Holt did with that Purdue defense, Purdue -1 against Northwestern there in that Thursday night game, that one looks a little bit cheap too.
Oh, yeah, and they opened up +1. Now, that didn't take maybe 1 or 2 bets to flip over to -1, but that's cheap, and especially I thought Northwestern overpriced because this was a team, and people forget they didn't cover the bowl game, but prior to that, I mean, they're going to see Northwestern win 10 games on the season, and a lot of times as a program, Northwestern coming off a 10-win season, the next season is the time to fade them, and prior to the bowl game, it's a team that won and covered like 7 straight games entering it, so I really like that one a lot. And keep in mind, Purdue had a great season, year one under Jeff Brom, but there was also some missed opportunity. I mean, they lost by a single point in the final seconds against Nebraska. They had another tough loss on the road against Rutgers by a couple of points. That very well could have been a 9-win team this year. So, and I think with what they'll have coming back, and especially at the wide receiver spot where they were really hurting entering this past season, they'll be improved, and I definitely think that line at minimum should be 3, so that would definitely be one I'd hop on right now.
Were those nickel limits on those 5 dimes week 1 lines?
Last I heard only 100 or 200, and Mandalay -120, and only be able to get down 100 or 200. That was what they were allowing at the opener. Maybe they increase it to a nickel as they get more of a handle on them, but that's the tough part. You can't get a lot down, and you got to lay -120. Even if the line's off 3 points, I would suggest, maybe 1 or 2 bets there, and we'll see. But, the great thing about that, and I know we're talking about it, and people ask me, well, what does it mean? Well, at least it gives you an idea of what the market perception is going to be on these teams. And I know it's a little limit and everything, but it's the first jumping off point where you see teams and where they're going to be at least initially in the marketplace. And you can start adding up where the value is going to be, whether it be futures, whether it be, when South Point opens up their week 1 lines or their game of the year or their season win totals. That's the jumping off part and why I'm kind of intrigued by those early lines.
All right, let's move over to the NFL side of things here with the AFC and NFC Championship games coming up this weekend. We'll start in Foxborough at Gillette Stadium. Jacksonville, New England, Patriots favored by 8.5, kind of the consensus number now. There are some 9s out there, but it is very interesting to me, Brad, to see that this number has gone down to 8.5 at several shops, 8 at Bookmaker, which means those teasers with New England under 3 have come back into play. So that leads me to believe that there's some pretty significant sharp action out there, forcing the books to adjust and leave themselves with some teaser exposure.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, we saw the money kind of come in on Jacksonville a little bit last week. And you definitely got to put it's the sharper, bigger side on Jacksonville. And I'll say this, they at least fit the mold of the teams that have given New England problems in the playoffs over the last decade. I mean, you remember Baltimore beating New England a couple of times. Great defense. You don't do much at the quarterback spot and really get after Tom Brady at the line of scrimmage, similar to both Giants teams that were coached by Tom Coughlin. Dominant front four, great pass defense for them. They got a great pounder, a guy that can really carry and tote the rock on the offense side of the ball, similar to like Brandon Jacobs and Leonard Fournette. So at least they fit the mold of the team that's given New England problems. Obviously, I think there's a little bit more to be made than what's being made, I should say, about the Tom Brady hand injury that happened. I don't think that's that big of a deal, but no question about it. I think we can at least safely say, as we're doing this on Thursday, that the bigger, sharper money's on Jacksonville, especially like you mentioned. I mean, that is some definite teaser exposure there that the books are going to have. I'll probably end up teasing New England, but I just don't see too much of a value aspect as far as the side goes. I'm more on the total than anything.
No, I don't see a ton of value either because you've got this Jacksonville team, and I've talked about this throughout the week here, 6 for 6 in the red zone in the playoffs. They were a top 5 offense in the red zone. New England, for as bad as this defense appeared to be throughout the year, and it did get better at the tail end, they were very good at bowing their backs there in the red zone, keeping teams from getting 7. They had to settle for 3. If that's the situation that Jacksonville's in here, you have to figure there are going to be some problems, especially when you look at the areas in which Pittsburgh exposed them last week, specifically with Vance McDonald. I mean, Rob Gronkowski is 2, 3, 4, 5 times the player, depending on your perception of Vance McDonald. So, New England has some opportunities here to get the football out, make some moves down the field, as long as Tom Brady stays upright. And Brady gets it out so quick. Very, very smart guy. Reads the defense as well as anybody before the snap. You got to think he's able to get this thing out quick. But, the interesting thing about this game, as well as the next game, is, you kind of talk these games to death throughout the week because it's just 2 standalone games, biggest games in town, massive handles. We've really turned over every single stone for these games here on the shows this week, between the Tom Coughlin angle with Jacksonville, between New England with both coordinators out there interviewing for head coaching jobs, with New England being a team that doesn't mind running it up in the fourth quarter. So, everybody has everything that they need to make a bet here on this game. And I think it is significant that we are seeing the sharp position, stand out pretty significantly on the Jacksonville side.
Yeah, and that's at this point, that's what you need to start following because we're down to just a few games left. These will be along with the Super Bowl, the 3 most bet games, most watched games of the entire season. So, just generally speaking, the line should be right. And the only time where you catch some value is there might be some misperception in the marketplace, particularly from the public. And a lot of times these are the pros versus Joes types of games that and you don't want to ever blindly bet on the Joes or the pro side of things. But when you got these very high handle type of games, more often than not, I like to be on the pro side of things because the one thing, the public handle, it can actually create some value because there's so much more public betting going on right here that might be able to keep that line relatively in check there where the sharp side can't move it too much. But anytime you get a half point to a point line move here, especially against a very popular public team in New England, that to me pretty much tips the hand. Now, am I going to put out a Jacksonville bet or a strong bet? No. Am I going to put out a strong bet on any side or total in one of these games? No, and that even goes to the Super Bowl. Outside of Super Bowl prop plays, anybody that has a relatively very strong play, I kind of scratch my head because in all reality, these should be some of the tightest lines and sharpest lines we've seen in the marketplace all year.
So what about the total here? You said that you've got a little bit of a stronger opinion on the total for this game, and as we look out there in the market right now, sitting 46 at Pinnacle. It's, 46 at Bookmaker as well. This number's bounced around between 46.5, 46, open 47, came down with some initial movement. Are you looking to follow that initial movement, or are you thinking that we're getting a high-scoring affair here?
No, I'm going with the movement. I'm going under, and here's where I think there's slight mispricing. I mean, that Jacksonville-Pittsburgh game was such an outlier last week, 45-42, that I think it's created a little bit of value on the under. And if you don't believe me, I mean, Jacksonville's highest totals line this entire season prior to this game, 42.5. So, 46, 46.5, we're talking 3.5, 4 points higher than any totals line we've seen for Jacksonville this entire season. On the flip side, New England-Tennessee game, in all intents and purposes, probably should have went under last week. I mean, Tennessee on their final drive converted not one but 2 4th and 10s. I mean, the chances of that, probably 25% to make one. You times that by 25% on the second one, like a 1 in 16 chance that they make both, and that goes over the total by a point. So I think maybe a point of value here because of those two factors. And then I also look at it. I already mentioned Jacksonville fits the mold of a team that's given New England's offense a lot of problems. And then on the flip side, New England's defense, you already mentioned it, it's terrible at the first 4 or 5 games, the worst defense in the National Football League. Reality is they're still giving up yards, but in their last 13 games, most importantly to this total, most pertinent, they've allowed 14 points per game in their last 13 games. That's number one in the NFL. So, yeah, they don't statistical-wise, yards per play, yards-wise and all that don't look great. But in the most important category, for the second season in a row, they're near the top of the NFL as far as points per game allowed. So I'm going with under 46, 46.5 is my official lean on that game.
All right, let's go to the NFC Championship game here where Minnesota takes on Philadelphia. Once again, Philadelphia, the sharp side, as the home dog. Pinnacle +3, minus $1.13, -3, +102 on the Minnesota side. So basically, we're seeing an indication that there's a chance, based on sharp money, that this number will come down to 2.5 at some places. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I thought more value last week with Philadelphia catching the 3 at home against an inferior Atlanta team. That game should have been closer to pick, in my opinion. A huge mispricing. Now, obviously, lines have been adjusted after last week's game. But, I still got a home underdog here, the number 1 seed. First time it ever happened last week. It's not as rare as far as the championship game goes, but it's a team with a chip on their shoulder. Don't believe it. I mean, they're pulling out the dog max. So, Philadelphia can again play the disrespected home underdog role here. They're 4-0 against the spread as a home dog in the playoffs. The Vikings haven't been a great playoff road team. They're 2-11 straight up, 3-10 against the number. They've lost all 3 matchups against Philly in playoff meetings. For this particular game, look, raise your hand if you had the NFC Championship game decided between a quarterback battle between Nick Foles and Case Keenum prior to the season. I'm sure you'd have gotten maybe 1,000-to-1 odds there. I expect both game plans to be very conservative. You saw what happened. Minnesota's up. Case Keenum has a bad interception, takes a sack, gets them out of field goal range. Nick Foles, they throw it down the field deep first play of the game. He's struggling. They have 4 fumbles. They lose 2 of them. I don't think you can trust either quarterback here. You got a pair of top 5 defenses. The total reflects that at 38.5. When you got a low total and you're telling me I'm going to lay 3 points on the road, I just don't think that's ideal. I'm leaning with the Eagles plus the 3, and I would probably say bet it now because I wouldn't be a bit surprised if it goes to 2.5.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it's trending that way. And what's interesting about this game is the perception in which people are going to view last week's wins. For Minnesota, everybody knows by now the way that game ended with the Minneapolis Miracle. Case Keenum in the second half made several very, very bad throws. The one that got picked, he had some back foot throws before that Stephon Diggs touchdown that, could have wound up being intercepted by the Saints. His decision-making was just not particularly strong in the second half. And Nick Foles, statistically it wasn't a bad performance from him, but the eye test told a little bit different of a story. Some wobblers, balls that were tipped, balls that were nearly picked. So, as you mentioned, I think we do see a very conservative game plan here, and this game probably does come down to, a sack and fumble or a bad interception or something like that. And when I get a situation like that where I don't know which quarterback it's going to be because these are both very talented defenses, I can't play this game. Even with a low total and a low spread, it feels pretty high variance in the sense that, anything could happen. It'll wind up probably near the number and near the total, but anything could happen to either one of these two teams. And at this stage of the game, I don't want to get invested in that. I'd rather save my money for something where I feel like I have an edge, like the prop betting market for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's a great point. Before you said it, I was thinking the same thing. Boy, for a game that looks like it's going to be very conservative, low scoring, it does have a lot of high variance because of the two quarterbacks. I think it's relatively sharp handicap. I mean, one of these quarterbacks could have a 3-4 turnover type of game. And look, we're not breaking mold here and really coming up with a very sharp handicap. I mean, the quarterback that makes the least amount of mistakes, I would say that team has a greater than 70% chance of not only covering the spread, but winning the game outright. I think it just comes down to which Foles or Keenum, what team can overcome a mistake or two, or what quarterback just doesn't make the fatal mistake. And again, it is a very high variance game because it would not shock me if one of the two quarterbacks just lays down and dies here. And that does make it a very, not very trustworthy bet. But look, this time of year, you shouldn't have one of your biggest bets of the year. And I, again, would scratch my head. Anybody that releases a strong pick or anybody that, makes one of their biggest bets, unless they completely see, misperception in the marketplace. And I just don't see it in this particular game.
All right, let's look at some of the Super Bowl look-ahead lines real quickly here. For Super Bowl 52, obviously, if Minnesota gets to this thing, they've got home field advantage, and that has to be factored in. So we'll touch on that a little bit here. If we see both favorites hold serve, that would obviously mean New England versus Minnesota, with Minnesota at home. 5 dimes right now showing New England -3 over Minnesota, total 47.5. Bet online right now showing New England -2.5. -$1.18, also the total at 47.5. So in that 2.5-3 range, is that about where you would put it?
Absolutely where I'd put it. Obviously you probably got to give Minnesota, you probably got to take, I would say their home field advantage, 4 points right now, but I would take a point off of that just because you're not going to get your typical season ticket holder in there. Higher crowd, probably more of a wine and cheese type of crowd with all the corporations and that. So, still got to give them 3 points, home stadium, and they'll still have the crowd advantage there, but not a full 4 points, more like 3. So that would make sense to me, and it makes sense. New England in these 7 Super Bowls that they played in, about every single one of them has been decided by 3 points. Superior edge for them with the Super Bowl experience, superior edge with them, obviously Tom Brady versus Case Keenum. I don't think it's a huge edge at the coaching edge. Now, you got to give it to Belichick, but, man, right now Mike Zimmer might be the second or third best coach in all of football. Don't believe me if you just blindly bet them against the spread since he took over in the last 4 or 5 years. I think they're hitting at like 70% counting the preseason. So, Zimmer it can hold his own for the most part. So, to me, the line should be 3. 47.5, I'd probably lean more towards the under. Minnesota, again, is the type of team that could give New England some issues on the offense side of the ball. And, again, New England's defense, I think, could keep Case Keenum and company in check. So if I got 47.5, I think under 47.5 with a line of 3 would be the pick there.
All right, what if we've got Patriots-Eagles here? Looking at 5 dimes, the look-ahead line, New England -7, -$1.15. Over at BetOnline, New England -7 flat, so -110 there. And obviously, this game then becomes a neutral site game. If Philadelphia beats Minnesota, there's no home field advantage to factor in here. What do you think about New England as a touchdown favorite if they play the Eagles?
First instinct would be to lay it. Although New England, again, has never had a Super Bowl where they've laid it on someone. They've been relatively conservative, played a typical game where it comes down to the wire each and every one of their Super Bowls. So it wouldn't be ideal, but let's just talk line value. Okay, you got a Minnesota team and an Atlanta team laying 3 on the road in Philadelphia in a playoff game where Philadelphia's home field advantage, probably 3 or 4 points. So you're telling me Minnesota and Atlanta on a neutral would be probably favored by 6 or 7 over Philadelphia, and now New England would be laying 7 in this instance against Philadelphia on a neutral. I think just from a pure value ask, I would lay the 7 with the Patriots, although I'd be concerned that they've never really won a Super Bowl by 7 or more points.
All right, if Jacksonville knocks off New England, and we saw Jacksonville knock off Pittsburgh last week, so it's certainly possible. Jacksonville versus Minnesota. Minnesota with the home field advantage here. 5 Dimes throwing that number up at 4.5. BetOnline throwing it up at 5.5 with a total of 40. So what do you think about the Jags versus Vikings potential matchup?
Probably at that point a slight lean on Jacksonville. You'd have to give them huge, major respect for beating Pittsburgh and New England on the road. 2 very similar style teams, very low total, inexperience as far as Super Bowl. Although Coughlin, the guy running the show there, has got some experience. I just think with those 2 type of defenses, I wouldn't want to lay anything more than 3.5 in a game. So I'd be on the take there with Jacksonville plus the 4, especially getting more than 4 points. I'd lean with the Jaguars.
All right, one other possible matchup, obviously, here. That would be Jacksonville taking on Philadelphia. Interesting line in this one. Jacksonville, 3-point favorite, plus $1.05 over at 5 Dimes. Jacksonville favored by 2.5, minus 115 at BetOnline in a possible matchup against the Eagles. So how about that one?
Yeah, that one seems a little steep to me. So I would probably lean with the Eagles in that regard. I just, and I would have it closer to pick them. I mean, you got 2 defenses that are pretty much top 5. Quarterbacks would probably even each other out, although I'd probably give a slight edge to actually Nick Foles in that particular instance. Neither team really has much Super Bowl experience. For the viewership, I hope that's not the matchup we get, to be honest with you. Jacksonville, Philadelphia. Bortles versus Foles just doesn't move the needle much for me. I would, again, be on the underdog there, the Eagles, plus the points.
All right, and of course, we'll see what happens with these numbers, how they get adjusted based on Sunday's outcomes. If Jacksonville blows out New England, you're going to see an adjustment to those look-ahead lines. If New England blows out Jacksonville, maybe New England becomes an even bigger favorite regardless of who they play. So, we will have some recency bias in the Super Bowl line. That's something that we'll talk about on next week's shows. But, Brad, let's spend a couple of minutes on college basketball here because I know that you've kind of transitioned over to that a little bit. Couple of intriguing matchups here tonight, both 9 o'clock Eastern time tip-offs. Let's start with what may be the biggest game of the evening here between St. Mary's and Gonzaga. Gonzaga, 7.5, 8-point favorites. Game 559, 560 on the board. Little West Coast Conference action tonight.
Yeah, and look, it was a really marquee matchup last year with Gonzaga. Obviously, ended up making the national championship game. Won and covered and really blew out St. Mary's all 3 games, decided by double digits. They pretty much have owned the series, and 2 dominant teams. This is the first game as far as conference matchup goes that you can get an idea where these teams are at because, this is the first time St. Mary's has been a dog all year. They played a really weak schedule, but bottom 100 out of 350 teams in the country. Gonzaga's schedule a little bit tougher, but, this is the first time they have laid less than 14 points since mid-December, a game that they lost outright to San Diego State. So a rare, relatively tight line for them, single-digit line. I just look at Gonzaga. They've owned St. Mary's over the last couple, not only last year winning, covering all 3, but really in this West Coast Conference, they've owned them. And you look at the defensive edge that they have, it's far superior. You just go off the Ken Pom adjusted defensive rankings, number 17 versus 128. So significant edge there, throwing the home court. Now the money's against me. I will put out there, it looks like, although a little bit of money has shown up here in probably the last half hour on Gonzaga because the line was 7. Now it looks like it wants to go to 8. I'm still leaning with the Zags. I got the game power rated at 10. I like them to cover the spread for the 4th consecutive time over St. Mary's.
All right, and then we'll look at the other 9 o'clock tip-off here. That's game 557, 558. USC takes on Oregon. Oregon opened a 2-point favorite. They're up to 3.5 or 4 out there in the marketplace, depending on where you look. And Oregon's a team that kind of intrigues me from a futures standpoint because they're not playing very well right now, but Dana Altman's a very good head coach. Lots of talent there in Eugene. I think you kind of see what the projected ceiling for this team might be with the line movement here tonight against a similarly talented USC team that has played a little bit better.
Yeah, and you look at it, Oregon's, again, owned the series, won and covered 4 straight against the Trojans. I power rate all 351 teams. You throw in the home court. I had this game power rated with Oregon. I mean, if you want to go to the 100th point, at 3.28. So I agreed with the initial line move here. 2 was the play with Oregon, in my opinion. Boy, 3.5, 4 starts getting a little tight for me. I thought they looked impressive back-to-back covers in the state of Arizona last week. That was coming off a stretch where, they had covered 2 out of 10 games. So, the marketplace was down on Oregon. Now you're starting to see some value on them. Believe it or not, I mean, this is the first time USC's been a dog since December the 8th. You don't typically think of them as a powerhouse. You look at them, I mean, they've actually covered and played some decent ball. They've covered 6 of their last 9 games, so they've been playing all right. But, man, Oregon with the defensive edge in this one, series edge, that's where the money's at. Although there's some value lost here with the line moving 1.5, 2 points, I'm still going to lean with the Ducks minus the points.
Before we wrap up here, Brad, I do want to ask you, you're so focused on college football, and that goes all the way through the national championship. And, I mean, hell, we started this segment with college football, and it's January 18th. So, in terms of that transition to college basketball, where you've got, a larger data set, you've got some things to go off of, a lot of it in the non-conference. There haven't been a ton of conference games for you to incorporate into your rankings. How's that transition going for you? I mean, do you feel like you're in a pretty good place with your numbers?
Yeah, I do think I'm in a good spot with my numbers, and I've actually been pleasantly surprised with them with my initial set I put out a few weeks ago. I've had a winning start, so, I mean, when you come in relatively cold, there's always a concern there that the market's way ahead of you. But, one thing that I've noticed, and I'm going to put it towards the future and look and see if it carries over to next year, and I'll give a tip of the hat to your next guest, Ralph Michaels from Cal Sports and Wager Talk. One thing that he's really identified where there's been some value this year is you just go off of strength of schedule differences, and it makes a lot of sense because a lot of times teams, fatten themselves up on a relatively weak non-conference schedule. The other team, might be sitting at 500, below 500, but their strength of schedule difference, once they get into conference play, there might be a difference of 100 spots or 200 spots if you just go off the Ken Palm strength of schedule rankings. And he's used it and had a very successful start to the season. And the last few weeks I've been using it and have had great success. So that's something to keep in mind anytime you start jumping really into conference play in the month of January, and something to take advantage of, because the marketplace for the most part just sees a couple of teams, just looks at records. And I'll use an example from the other night. Drake was playing Northern Iowa. The public was all over Drake, who was, at the top of the Missouri Valley Conference. Northern Iowa, with not such a good record, but Northern Iowa has played a much tougher schedule. And that was one where the pro side, including one of your guests on there, Brian Leonard, was on Northern Iowa. And I can just tell you, I walked into a casino, and there was a lot of people talking about Drake that I was overhearing. I'm like, oh, my goodness, that Northern Iowa play, that's going to be a winner, and ended up being. So that's one thing to keep in mind here. If you're not understanding a line, check out the strength of schedule, because there's probably a reason why. And if it's still not reflected into that line, man, there's some value there. And another thing that I've been using and having success, it's same as football. I love defensive superior teams in the home underdog role. Used 3 of them last night. Texas, I used Rutgers, and Alabama all had, similar or even stronger defenses. They're catching points. They're at home. That's been a go-to philosophy for me, not only in football, but as basketball as well.
Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. What's going on over at the website right now, man?
Yeah, we talk about it each and every week, and I know it's going to sound like a broken record, but I'll tell you, you can get some great value right now, meaning if you want to sign up for the newsletter for not only the rest of this season, but also an early bird special for next season's football action, you can do so for $49. That's the rest of this year, all of next year. $49 for a weekly newsletter. You get power ratings on all college football teams. You get game write-ups on every single college football game. It's probably just worth it in itself for all the future tickets that I put up as far as not only college football, but the NFL as well. And the NFL the last 3 years has actually performed better on a week-by-week basis during the regular season than the college. In fact, number 1 in the country as far as all the newsletters out there, 57.5% winners in the NFL blindly, about 150-game sample size. So $49. It's called the Powers Picks newsletter. You can get it for the rest of this year and next year. Go to BradPowersSports.com.
And you can follow Brad on Twitter at Brad Powers and the number 7. Brad, appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good. Take care.